Nah, I'm starting it mid-laugh. Howdy, everybody. Welcome back to Roundup, episode 2 of season 2, I suppose, of Roundup Reformed is what we're running with. But I think if we're starting episodes off like this, you can't really say Roundup Reformed. I'm back with Luth, back with Flam. Shout out to everyone who watched that first episode. It's good to be back. Hope you guys are well. Anything interesting happen since we last recorded? Either of you? No? Okay, great. Well, let's talk about IEM Dallas. That's kind of where we left off the last episode, sort of saying, IEM Dallas was kicking off just after the majors finished, and we had the same 3 teams, Grayhound, Mouse Sports, G2, with all our Aussie representatives. And we sort of left off that last episode like, well, what's going to happen? We had Mouse sort of shit the bed at the major.
No.
Grayhound had a decent enough performance, and G2 kind of felt a bit lackluster. So let's dive into IEM Dallas, I suppose. Luth went through those teams. Sort of what made this event a little different from Paris?
Well, for start, Mouse won a few games. Quite a few more.
Yes!
Yeah, absolutely.
Quite a few more than they did, of course, at the major where they went out 0-3 in their
Good
group
start.
at Paris. So, not exactly your most ideal, but instead managing to get themselves a second place finish there, which, they lost to Ents in the end, but being able to get to that point, I mean, shit, that's pretty good. Grayhound, I guess kind of we'll elaborate a bit more, but, kind of not going the way that maybe not expected, but at least hoped. And then G2, still better than the major, to be honest.
Yeah. Sort of a more of the same performance from G2 is how I sort of looked at it. Yeah, cool. Well, I think a lot of things were different at Dallas in the sense of a lot less pressure for the teams this time around, which is very nice. Format was a bit different in some regards, more forgiving for some teams, less forgiving for others. Let's jump straight into Grayhound, I guess. Flam, do you want to kick us off with kind of what went wrong for Grayhound?
They just versed one of the top 5 teams in the world.
As you do.
They got 2 rounds. Yeah, boys, it's better than nothing. And
Better than the
then,
16-0 at the major.
It is very much better than a 16-0 at a major, I'll be completely honest. But 2-0 to Liquid, I guess. Nitro send off. I guess in the Counter-Strike scheme of things, it's the good ending technically, because Nitro gets his send off after playing for more than 1,000 maps with Liquid or something like that.
Crazy,
having
yeah.
above 50% win percentage with Liquid as an org. For the CS world, a good send off for his career for Captain America, but for Grayhound, they showed, I guess, a little bit more fight than we saw in the major. They just needed to close out those games. They had too many match points going through for both Inferno and Mirage, and I mean, yeah, for Grayhound, they did a lot right. They did a lot more right than what they did at the major against Liquid, but still just weren't able to get it quite done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I make sure you check out my written summary on the Snowball website, by the way, if you haven't already, because I did a bit of a recap on there. And the thing I said about Grayhound is that we got everything we always get from them. We got an insane loss where one player played really, really, really well, and they still only got a couple rounds. That was Int popping off on C9. And then we got some insane overtime games in a heartbreaking sort of elimination match. Luth, how much more of this sort of can we take? Are we happy with this for Grayhound? Is this sort of what we just expect? I saw a lot of people say a lot of things about what they should be doing, this and that. What do you make of it all?
I mean, look, you can't look at the score lines for that Liquid series and say that there's nothing special about Grayhound, that they're not able to punch above their weight, and they very much have done that by being able to push Liquid into overtime when Liquid, are regularly able to prac against international opponents and have so much more experience from being able to just, play other teams. And there was that interview as well after, I believe it was with Ind, if I remember right, where he's just kind of talking about how there's one other team in OC for them to really get decent prac against. And even then it's there's just not that there for them. And there was a bit of discourse about that, about well, what would happen if Greyhound did eventually just decide, just pack up their bags, take the Renegades approach of old, and move to NA or probably EU, more likely, if they were to do so. But don't know if the players want to do that, but of course. But it's always an interesting what if. Like, it's the fact that, like, no matter what, how strong like Greyhound are, even at the strongest point, it's the fact that their international opponents just have that edge, being able to get that practice against in as well. And there's also a lot of talk about getting a coach in and like what more they could be doing in those regards, just to try and help them close games out, because that's what they've been struggling with a lot. So
yeah,
but
if you had to pick like just your standout player from this event on Greyhound, for me it's Inns, and it's constantly Inns. Did you guys have a different player who's your standout on this lineup?
I mean, if we're looking at that Liquid series, which really was where they showed up the most, Vexite had a 1.3 rating across both those
Absolutely
maps.
popped off.
So
Yeah.
I'd say Vexite. He absolutely popped off.
Flam?
Yeah, I was going to say probably Vexite as well. But seriously, for that Liquid series, it's the first time we've seen Liaz, not be in the red for his kill differential as well. As rough as it sounds, he's been more of a mentor than a performer at the moment for this Greyhound roster. And, as it's helping Greyhound sort of grow, we're seeing Liaz sort of run back into a set of good form. And I want to see, I truly want to see him do well. I want to see Liaz do well. He went dead even. He went dead even against Liquid over both their maps, and it's good to see him finally, showing up just a little bit more. And it's good to see in the server. We love seeing it in the server. We really do.
Well, we're going to get to see more Greyhound at ANZ Champs coming up this weekend, I believe, for the playoffs. We still don't have the playoffs sort of teams finalized. It's still just Greyhound and Vertex as of the time recording, but we'll touch on more of that at the end of this podcast. Excellent time to now talk about Dexter and mouz, because we sort of, Luth mentioned it, that we saw a really, really different version of mouz at this event. A fantastic run, big improvement from the major. I sort of want to open it up to you, maybe Flam. You can sort of, where does mouz go from here? Is consistency the problem? Was this sort of potential always there for the team, or is there still problems?
It's mouz. It's mouz. It's mouz.
Is that,
we
yeah?
literally see them bow out early in tournaments, and the next tournament they will come second, and then they will bow out again. It's just a form of like, it's just like they'll have their good events immediately followed
Very hot
by
and cold.
just the worst result you've seen in your life, and you're just sitting there going, why do mouz do this to me, right? They're a young team. They're a young team. They do what they do best. They've got an experienced caller leading them. They've got a caller who, knows how to utilize his players the best that he can in Dexter. For mouz at the moment, it's more about just trying to find consistent results in tournaments and being able to, consistently sort of slowly just develop the younger talent they do have. For mouz at the moment, I guess it's sort of a waiting game to see if they can get themselves, that consistency that I think we're all sort of after. Because, when they're playing their best day, they can quite easily be a top 10 team in the world. I don't think that's undoubtable for anybody. But when they're playing, as bad as we saw them play in Paris, then, you can really make the argument of, what's going on with mouz? Why? Really? Like, just why?
Yeah, it's very weird, like their inconsistency, I suppose. Because it's like, I feel like expectations going into Paris were definitely there a bit for mouz, at least. I mean, shit, no one would have seen a 0-3 coming through.
Not in
Like,
challenger stage.
Yeah, that's not something I think anyone expected. If at worst they'd take one of those, best of ones, or even a map in the best of 3 they played, but they didn't take any of that, and it was really quite poor. So I don't know what happened in the couple weeks between, their final match there and the start of Dallas, but obviously, some kind of mental refresh coming in, probably the pressure of it being the last major, or being a major at all for that matter, just kind of falling by the wayside, just being an IEM event. I don't know, maybe there's some kind of mental aspect to it as well. Who knows? But
I'm
either
looking
way,
I'm looking at the wins, and it's Fnatic with a stand-in, Furia, like I won't even go into that, and then an Astralis that's not quite in form. Their big scalp that they took was heroic. Do you think that that was a sign? Do you think that that was maybe just a bit of a lucky kind of win and more heroic shitting the bed? Notorious chokers.
I
Hard to say.
mean,
It like
yeah, it's hard to say.
yeah.
I don't know, because on one hand, it's like heroic. They had a decent run at Paris. I mean, if we're looking like outside of IEM Dallas, but even then, they were kind of expected to go a little bit further than they did. I mean, they lost to Gamer Legion, so I guess thinking of it that way, it's that same heroic thing of sometimes maybe good, sometimes maybe shit, but in this case, a bit of both came out from them in both their games against mouz. So
Yeah. I'm not 100% sure where we next see mouz. I will double check that while we maybe look forward to.
some online event by the looks of it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
should
Maybe
know.
or 500.
I put it.
Plaza
Anyway,
It's 500
Invitational
or
Spring
500.
2023 is what HLTV said.
oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. No clue what that tournament is, but
No.
I'm sure
It's
we'll cover
like
how they
the
go.
top tier 2. It's like the top tier tournament. It's like the
Yeah.
top tier 2 tournament in EU at the moment, boys. Come on, please.
Yeah.
That's where they play the winner
Thank
of
you,
Habu
Mr.
and
EU
500.
Caster.
No, I think in terms of like big
Anytime,
competitive
kids.
events for this season, that's kind of it for mouz. So
Yeah.
I don't know. We look at I look at mouz and I just they didn't play many events and they weren't at many of don't have as many maps as some of these other teams. So I kind of feel like we didn't see a lot of mouz in comparison to uh, G2 and whatever this season. So maybe that hindered them more than it helped them, all of that downtime. Let's talk about G2 and our boy
Yeah.
JKS. I feel like
Yes.
it's a bit of a Groundhog Day for G2 because Justin always plays quite well, especially when we get to the playoffs. He does his job. He does what is expected of the team. Sounds like a footy player, did my job, did what the boys needed me to do. But they just aren't sort of getting the wins for what this kind of caliber of a team should get. Does one of you kind of want to kick us off with like what's the go with G2? Is it just more of exactly what we said last week? Has anything changed?
I don't think a lot really has changed, honestly. I feel like they took 2 losses, right? They lost 2-0 to Heroic and they lost 2-1 to FaZe, which sent them out of IEM Dallas. And I feel like that's probably both much more formidable opponents compared to the Fnatic that sent them out of the Blast Major.
Yeah.
But even still, it's like this is on paper supposed to be one of those top 5 teams in the world, right? I feel like maybe they could be just a little bit more competitive. I feel like maybe with something there, they should be pushing a little bit further ahead. I don't know exactly what it is, but it's like that's kind of got to be their aim at the moment, right? Is just how can they push ahead from where they're currently at a standstill? They've been able to get themselves to, to be, I guess, considered in that top 5 kind of position, but it's like, how do they push even further? It feels like that kind of momentum behind them where they were, placing really well at a bunch of events and things like that is just kind of slowed down a bit.
Flam, if you're the manager and you have infinite cash, you do whatever you want, right? You're JKS's manager. Do you and you somehow also have control over the G2 lineup? Would you make changes on G2 or would you rather see JKS go off and be on some other super mega team? Is he better somewhere else? If you could do anything you wanted, what would you do? Is there more potential on G2 or elsewhere?
I feel like there's the right potential in G2. I
Yeah.
feel like there just needs to be a change, not with the players, but with the coach at the moment. I think Swaney has done a great job. However, he hasn't produced the results that I think his tenure of almost nearly a year at the moment is sort of pushing through. Bear in mind, he's got, a 70% win rate, but a lot of those wins came earlier in the season where, earlier in the year, my apologies, you bring in JKS, you bring in Hooksy, you've worked with those guys pretty much since the start. You've had very little roster changes, and yet we're still seeing, those surprise losses to FaZe. We're seeing surprise losses to Fnatic. We're seeing, sort of expected losses to Heroic at the moment. It feels like there's something that's got to give, whether they, bring in a second coach to help sort of with the analytical side, potentially with the mental sort of thing. If I'm G2's management at the moment, you don't change the roster. Your roster is on paper probably the best in the world at the moment. There is no doubt in my mind about that at all. You've got Nico, you've got Monacy, you've got Hunter, you've got JKS, Hooksy. So he's got less firepower. He's the only person below a 1 HLTV rating at the moment in the last 3 months.
He is the Giga Chad, though.
And yet he's
true.
And yet he's probably the best caller in the world. Like, apart from what Carrigan was maybe 6 months ago, he probably is the best caller in the world. And it's, I feel like it's got to be, there's got to be a little bit more of an extra support staff member to help this team out rather than, a change with the roster, if you know what I mean.
I mean, I know a lot of people were giving Hooksy a lot of shit on Twitter. Like, I know that he was copping a lot of the blame for the results of the Paris major, and then again, we're kind of just saying like things a little better at Dallas, but not a lot better. And I definitely think, Flam, what you've just said, Hooksy being the best caller in the world is definitely a controversial statement. I don't think that's.
I'll stick by it.
I mean, yeah, stick by it. I don't think that's definitely not a statement that's, I suppose, universal. I mean, you look at.
I don't think a lot of people share that at all.
Yeah,
like, I'm very much in the pool that the first change I would make on this lineup would be a different IGL.
Yeah. So... I mean, you look at Heroic; they've got Cadian going for them as well. Also, probably considered one of the top, IGLs at the moment, and he can at least sharpen the server.
Yeah. Yeah, well,
you got 4 bombs in that. You got 4 bombs on G2 side. Why do you need a 5th? Like, really?
Yeah, well, that's the FaZe argument. Carrigan makes it work, but I guess it just comes down to you could make arguments either way, right? I think G2 are just stuck in this. I called it a Groundhog Day. That's exactly what it is, I think. The coach is definitely a good. If we're not going to make a roster move, the coach would definitely be an interesting play.
Yeah, I agree. I think if you're not gonna think of a roster move being the play, then that's, I guess, the closest thing to it.
The next thing.
But I think if you were gonna make a roster play, if you were gonna make a roster move, I feel like everyone on that team besides Hooksy is just not a piece you'd want to change. Like,
it's so hard to justify.
I feel like you take a loss swapping any of those other players out, whereas at least with a different IGLing style, maybe these players at least would work differently.
Yeah,
but I don't know. It's a difficult job. That's the thing. It's like it's a difficult piece to fit because you're not only just being in that IGL position, but you're doing it for these 4 absolute guns.
4 players who are just objectively insane in comparison.
Yeah. But if anything, that should also make your job easier. So I don't know.
Who picks up the mantle if they kick Hooksy? Who do they bring in?
That's the conundrum. I saw that hilarious post somewhere about someone saying they should bring in Azza, and then we should get rid of Munazy and bring in Grat, and then we should get rid of... And they just rebuilt the Renegades lineup. I was like, that's funny. That's a good...
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
They should do that.
Yeah. I don't know. I'd have to sit there and properly... like what I want and what would like in theory work, and you can only speculate on whether people would get along and cultural and language barriers. So it's tough. I'd love to see a veteran IGL go in like Carrigan or Snappy.
Ooh.
Do they bring in SDY?
I mean, not that they'd probably leave FaZe.
That's what I mean, right? Like,
but like hypothetically, like that
complete. Like, do you just do garbage another team for the sake of wanting to see that G2 project be a bit different? I would, but I'm a psycho.
It'd be interesting. It'd make for some good entertainment at the very least.
Yeah. We will, however, get to see G2 once more, I think, this year
Blast
for
Premier.
Blast. So
That
for
will
spring
be
finals. Oh, we'll get to see plenty of them the rest of the year. I just mean in the next couple weeks, months.
yeah. They play Cloud9 tomorrow morning from when we're recording this, so probably already has happened in the time the episode has. But yeah, that's
there you go.
G2. That's G2.
Yeah. We'll do a quick. There was another event. ESL Impact played at Dallas, sort of attached to the event. And for anyone who did miss it, on CLG Red, we have an Australian player on there. So they've just been picked up by, it was FlyQuest, I believe.
Yeah.
Did you guys get to catch any of this? There was that amazing clip going around of BibiAhn reacting to the crowd. It must be amazing being able to play in front of a crowd. That's always something players talk about in general.
Yeah, of course.
But she's actually probably one of our most successful players, to be honest. Like, internationally, at least.
Yeah, I mean, God, BibiAhn's always been just super sharp, right? Like, definitely a player to watch out for. And they placed third, fourth at the ESL Impact finals. They fell short to the Navi team, who then played against Enigma Galaxy, who took that one. And yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think, especially given there was a bit of doubt over what was happening with that former CLG Red lineup when the organization kind of, I mean, they went under pretty much, didn't they? Like,
classic esports, really.
Yeah, classic esports, of course. But
yeah,
but yeah, just the fact that they've been able to come back in and put up a really solid first performance, really great. And I really want to see what BibiAhn can do overseas, even more so as well, because she's been absolutely killing it. So yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I just wanted to touch base on that because it's another Aussie that we follow for the sake of Roundup, and
yeah, of course.
Yeah, maybe flies under the radar a little bit. FlyQuest's a bit under the radar. That was bad. Let's quickly touch on what we'll be talking about next sort of episode. Over the weekend, we've got ANZ champs. Bit of a playoff preview now, but we'll talk about it after the fact next week. Vertex were through. Grayhound were through from stage 1. It's looking like Rooster's probably going to make it through stage 2, and then a couple teams are sort of in the running to get through. Is it just going to be another Grayhound? I think there's a spot for Pro League on the line, but they might. I forget how all of this works, to be honest. I feel like it changes.
And then we've got an open qualifier as well.
Yeah, so I think there's a couple slots for Pro League for the region at least. But we'll just focus on ANZ champs real quick because do you guys think anything out of the ordinary is going to happen? Do we know what do you think Vertex can come out swinging? I think they're the real contender.
I mean, you definitely think that. I feel like Vertex have very solidly established themselves in that number 2 slot in OCE for quite a while. I mean, I feel like that on-call roster really wasn't working out, and they bowed out in stage 1 and then just didn't compete again in stage 2. I'm not entirely sure what's happening with that roster, to be quite honest. I think it's just dead, but which is a shame because I feel like it could have had so much potential, but is what it is. That's OCE for you. I feel like Rooster as well, I really do want to see them get through, and I think honestly looking at this bracket, I think that's probably the most likely outcome, because I feel like Rooster are that kind of team where they've just got really sharp players and some really sharp plays to go with it, and they can really just kind of show up and just really bring the heat when they need to. Whether they're able to do that up against the likes of Vertex, maybe that's more in question. I feel like Grayhound, I feel like they're not gonna lose somehow after almost beating Liquid across 2 maps. I feel like to come back into ANZ champs will kind of feel like a bit of a difficulty change for them for the better.
Back to easy mode.
Yeah. So
if
no sweat for them.
Flam, assuming Greyhound go through, and if they don't go through at ANZ champs, they go through the online quals. Who's the other team who's playing ESL Pro League? Have you got Vert? Have you got Rooster? Have you got someone else you're just going to throw in there?
Well, you know me, I like to be chaotic. I know. I want to come in with a dark horse here.
Go on.
Eliminators.
Ooh.
If they could get through the lower bracket, I
Yeah.
honestly reckon they could be a chance.
That's-
As much as we all hate Foggers here, right? As much as we all hate him,
Oh, of course.
I genuinely think there can be a chance that eliminators have sort of floated around that top 5, top 4 in OCE for a little bit at the moment. They're in sort of the likes with Sunday School, sort of Antic on a good day. Big Dogs, Mind Freak when they're playing well and playing sort of teams that they can get over the line with such an inexperienced team. Eliminators, they have an opportunity to. Well, at the time we're recording at the moment, Big Dogs and Mind Freak are playing as we're recording it. They've just finished first map. Eliminators will play the winner of that. If they can, it's most likely that they beat the winner of Mind Freak and the Big Dogs, and they've got to take on the loser of Sunday School and Rooster. They will most likely be taking on Sunday School, and then top 2 get themselves a chance in that final stage. So they could even sneak themselves into the finals here playing Vertex or Grayhound. And if they come up against Vertex, there's a really good opportunity that they could, sneak themselves a bit of a cheeky Pro League spot.
Yeah. Or an
Yeah.
exhausted Greyhound, like, traveling back from the US fucking sucks. So,
Yeah.
I reckon definitely next episode we'll do a full kind of a look at champs, break down all the stages, go through kind of what happened, what went well, what went wrong, and touch on ANZ main as well. So lots and lots of like proper domestic Counter-Strike to sink our teeth into.
Back to the roundup roots.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
So there you go. IEM Dallas. Yeah, that if you like a written version, go check the one on the side out. Otherwise,
Who wrote that, Ash? Who wrote that?
Me.
Whoa!
I know.
Whoa!
So, yeah. Otherwise, got any closing thoughts on IEM Dallas? I think we've sort of gone through it all quite well. I think lots of good domestic stuff to look forward to as the international stuff starts to roll back.
Quick thoughts on the new CS2 changes.
I'm up for anything. I want my fucking beta access though. I would love to be
Yep.
able to play it.
Yeah, I'd love
Just
to play
that
it.
Taffy. Taffy has spare keys.
Everybody
Taffy
message Taffy.
has spare keys. Just go text on Twitter.
Yeah.
Just go message Taffy on Twitter.
No, I think, yeah, for anyone who's missed it, being able to sell your guns back and if you miss buy, and then the 5 slots for different types of weapons is very interesting.
Yeah. I don't know. I think it'll be a positive change.
Leave your
So-
comments down below. Smash that like button on the way out as well. It really helps us guys make more episodes of this podcast.
Hit the bell.
Hit the bell.
Hit the bell.
Hit the subscribe button and hit the real subscribe button, that notification bell. And stay
Follow us on
tuned.
Twitter.
Follow us all on Twitter.
All our apps are on screen if you're watching
There
on
we are.
YouTube.
There we are.
Give us a 5-star review.
Don't forget to follow on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Fuck, what else can we plug?
Yeah, no, look, that's, you get the idea, guys.
Snowballesports.com. Watch, read some articles. I don't know.
Yeah, you guys all get the idea. Thanks. This was Roundup. We'll catch you guys hopefully next week for some ANZ champs and main action.